Greetings, everyone. Greetings, family. I'm David S. I'm an ACOA, and I am feeling scared, anxious, grateful, and numb. I feel a numbness in my middle. Really wonderful to be here with you, which is for me is the afternoon. As I was sitting here, I was thinking, man, it's great being at an ACA meeting in the middle of the day. I am unable, as a result of my schedule, to be able to attend meetings in the afternoon. And so I was rushing around this morning. I had got up this morning and I was like, man, I got to, this day ahead of me, I had to run over to this facility, take care of some things there. And then I planned on getting to my office in time with an hour to spare to set myself up to get ready for the meeting, blah, blah, blah. And as you know, it typically goes, best laid plans, God hears it and laughs. I got to my office with 5 minutes to spare and was able to sign on and get here. But I have to acknowledge it was all on time, so I'm grateful for that. Um, what happened? It's a really wonderful thing coming into ACA and getting the space and having the reflections of others' experience to actually uncover, discover, and heal what happened to me, as a child and what those events were and the impressions I took from it and how I chose to live my life as a result of it. Many of the childhood experiences I had, I didn't recognize as being traumatic. I had no idea they were traumatic. I had no idea that they were adaptive behaviors that I took on as a result of the deprivations that I felt and experienced as a child, and which translated into me adopting maladaptive behaviors. And what those were for me is I am 64, 64 years of age. And when I was born in 1959, in a place in the States, in the middle of the States, in fact, in Nebraska was the state, very isolated in the sense of, few factories, cornfields, like agriculture was transpiring at that time. And my family, my mother was married to a member of the military, and they quickly, I guess, maybe within before I was maybe I was probably just months old when they divorced. They separated, and my mother met another man, and they got married and had another. I have a brother who is. We're both the same age for about maybe 2 or 3 months. So he had another baby right on the heels of me, and they got married, and I had an instant family of 3 kids because the fellow she married already had a kid. So I have an older brother who is my adoptive older brother, and then all my other siblings are my half brothers and sisters, of which I have 13. But for much of my childhood, I was always of the mind that, if I had been with my other family, I would get the love, belonging, and safety that I felt I needed, I longed for. I didn't know what was missing, but I just knew something wasn't right. Um, my dad, in fact, I was talking about this yesterday. I can remember at one point my stepdad, my adoptive father, saying to me, you kids don't appreciate what it is I do for you and all I have to do for you. And he was kneeling down talking to us, because we were very small at that point. And I can remember thinking to myself at that young age that, Daddy, we do care. We do care that you do those things, right? But not having the vocabulary to speak it. And there were other events that transpired that also shaped it. I can remember my father was my stepfather was an alcoholic, practicing alcoholic. He was a police officer. He's also former military, so very strict disciplinarian, very strict in his outlook on life and what he passed on to us. In fact, I remember one point he said to me and my one of my brothers kneeling at the same time, that all you guys need is a chapstick and a handkerchief in your pocket and you'll be fine. Right. And, taking that lesson to heart, and making sure I always had those things on me. And my same thing with my biological father. He also was an alcoholic, military person. And so these same sort of rule things. And I got a real anecdote about that I'll share with you momentarily. But so my father, my stepdad who raised me, that was his outlook on life. And my mother was a very good codependent, very controlling, very controlling, and there's another word I want to use for her, but it escapes me in this moment. Another phrase I'm going to use for her. But so that was the environment, right? And then I had, me and my other siblings, and of which in that family there was 7 of us, and then the other 6 come from my biological father. I always thought as a kid that, again, I think I'm repeating myself at this point, but that if I had been raised with my biological father, it would have been a different environment, different experience. And of late, within just this past year, I got the opportunity to spend maybe 3 weeks with my biological father. He's currently has a medical condition. He's in renal failure, and he had declined dialysis. And so the thought was he was going to make his transcend rather quickly. And so I went down to spend some time with him. And while I did that, other members of the family did the same thing. So I got to hang out with those members of that family who I didn't know in large part. His brothers, some of his nieces, his nephews, and that sort of stuff. And I was like, just as a result of getting to know them, I was like, it feels like the blessing was being adopted and not being raised by this family. But they had a different outlook and a different experience, which is very much generally accepted within that family as to, courses of life. So that was that experience. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that was really this, I think a lot of the laundry list, even then, the laundry list traits became apparent just in the way my parents behave, because I see those behaviors in them and I see them in myself as well. Coming to mind right now, fear of authority figures, choosing people to love that, confusing love with pity, right? Not feeling enough. So there's these laundry list traits that, became ways of operating and viewing the world, and it wasn't until coming into program that it became clear that, these were dysfunctional ways of being and experiencing life. I had no idea as to that. I thought, everybody saw and thought the way that I did about relationships and all the judgments and all the fears that I had about living life. And there was this great frustration. It certainly looked to me that everybody else was having an easier time having life accomplishments than me. That for whatever reason, that, there was just this frustration and this lack of clarity, right, about just life, living life generally. So my family at one point, that's coming to mind. Around the age that time I turned 12, my stepdad started throwing me out of the house. Didn't matter the what and the why of it. I was a good kid. I wasn't getting in any trouble or anything like that. I'd come home from school and it's like, get out, right? And I'd get out and I'd go. First time it happened, I think I just sat outside the house for a while. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought, I'd go, hang out with my friends. But already I'd had the experience hanging out with my friends that their mom and dad would at some point say, that kid needs to go home. He can't be hanging out over here all the time. It's like I'm feeding an additional mouth. He has to go home. And so I would have to go home. And so I thought, well, I could go over to my friend's house, but I was like, nah, they already told me I can't go hanging out over there anymore. And this was multiple friends. So I came to the conclusion I just go down to my mom's job and hang out down there and wait for her to get off work. And that got to be pretty routine that would happen. And that really makes me feel sad. And my littles, yeah, it's still, it's very, feels very hurtful to have that happen. And um, wow. Um, so that was about 12 or 13. And then by the time I got to be 16, I think my mom came to me at one point and said, "Hey, we think you should drop out of school and go into the military." And I thought about it for a while and I was like, I don't want to leave my friends in school and it'd be like me abandoning them. And I was like, I didn't want to do that. And so I didn't. I did wind up going into the military after when I got to be, I think 20, I went into the military. At that point, my own drinking and drugging had just gotten out of hand, even for me at that point in time. I just felt like I didn't, um, that sense of not having a rudder, just, being listless. And I felt like, the mistake I had been made was not going into the military. So I chose to go into the military at that point. And I went in. The great thing was about they did have a lot of rules. And as long as I know the rules, I'm good. I know what to do and what not to do. Right. And that takes care of the externals. But the internal was just crazy. I just was oftentimes confused, and I just felt lost in life. And by the time I got into 12-step recovery in the beverage fellowship, um, came about as a result of me feeling like I was just suicidal and just being frustrated with life. And so I got into, and that was through the hospitals. I literally went to the hospital and said, "Hey, I'm feeling suicidal." And they said, "Okay." They set me down and sent me and eventually sent me to the rooms of AA. And once in the rooms of AA, I was really baffled by that because I felt like, coming into that program, I was like, I don't get how this is going to alleviate these things that I believe are concerns in me. Not having a job, not having a girlfriend, not having blah, blah, blah. And what happened was at the same time I was coming into AA, I was also sent to ACA. And I got into ACA and I thought, okay, this has some resonance. Yeah, I did, have some of these childhood experiences, but they were in the past. I didn't see how they were reflecting in my life today. I didn't see how the outgrowth of those childhood experiences, those traumas, that broken heart was having some reflection in my world today. And that was back before we had the red book, back before we had the yellow workbooks and the laundry list workbooks and the reparenting workbooks. And I don't even recall them back then that there were step groups being formed. I think we came to the meetings and we were sitting around in a circle talking about what happened to us, and I don't recall hearing much recovery at that point in the meetings. I do recall a lot of just experiences, and there were flyers and that sort of stuff. And I came to the conclusion that, yeah, that happened. And I think I decided I wasn't going to go to ACA anymore at that point. I think that I just stuck with my AA at that point. And what happened was I got to the place in my recovery where I needed something else. There was just this lack of emotional recovery, this emotional, um, the landscape of me. I had had multiple failed relationships. There were this uh, fear of authority figures, and there was always this looming sense that I was a fraud and was going to be found out in some way, and that I didn't belong. I was having some successes in my work and in my educational pursuits, and there was just this sense that, oh my, yeah, you got that, but you didn't get it on your own merit. You got lucky. Somebody just gave it to you, and you didn't deserve it, right? And even now, that comes up, in the work that I do, that I'm a fraud, and that they'll find out, and then you'll be put in your place. And so coming back into ACA, I uh, started. Well, I have to mention I had a good friend of mine who's passed, who was a very much uh, very adamant about ACA work and did lots of talks and worked on the Red Book work groups to improve it. Jim Y, who has since passed, and I miss him immensely. But he said to me that at a CODA meeting, David, I really think that you should go to ACA meeting. And I have one that I've been attending that I think you might like. And so I was like, whatever. I went to there already. I know what that's about. And so because I liked the guy and I liked his recovery, I said, okay, I'll go. And so I went. And man, the light came on in that first session as to the language that was being spoken. The recovery that was there was just, this idea about being able to reparent myself with the gentleness, love, and humor and respect. And I didn't even know I needed reparenting, but whatever it was they were talking about at that point, it had a resonance for me that was like, oh, this is something I need. And just as a result of, my experiences in the other fellowship, I got to, oh, well, I need to be of service. And what became really clear at those early ACA meetings was that my AA recovery was not good for my ACA recovery because there it was all about, yeah, we have this thing that we focus in on as the measure of our abstinence, the measure of recovery. And the quality of that is contingent upon me not engaging in that behavior, right? So long as I ain't doing that, then we good to go. Go be of service and, sin no more. And that was fine. But this recovery that we get to do in ACA is distinctly different. This is the emotional landscape. This is emotional landscape of myself, right? And how I'm be able to be present with myself, how I'm loving myself, how I'm languaging with myself, how I'm speaking with myself. Those sort of things become crucial. And that has a reflection, in my day-to-day life. It has a reflection in my marriage as to how I'm able to show up and be loving and be kind and be open. And whether or not, I'm coming into that relationship with these places in me of intimacy hardened and unreceptive to being in relationship. That I lack humility, right, to hear and to be present. That there's another person over there with feelings, needs, and a life looking to, bond with me and create a life together. And I'm just going to go here. I had never expected or even wanted to be married. And 5 years ago, that happened for me. And it was a surprise all along that that was happening. That was going to be what I was going to do. So coming back, there we go. Coming into ACA, I uh, I can't remember what the first. I think I was a greeter at one of my first ACA meetings, and then I subsequently, became the secretary. And at this particular meeting, we were interested in creating step groups, and so I initiated that process of gathering names and pairing people up so that they could work the yellow workbook together. I got myself a yellow workbook group, and to this day, I still am in contact with those individuals. We're not working together on the steps, and it was really a foundational experience for me uh, being with a group of people and getting to know them to the degree that I got to know them and connect and relay because I grew up with seven brothers and sisters and I felt closer to my step group than I ever felt than with my brothers and sisters that I grew up with. There was an intimacy, a connection, a disclosure that I had with them that I didn't have with my brothers and sisters that I grew up with. And then so that was my yellow workbook group. Then I got into another group, and we worked together the laundry list book and the reparenting workbook. We're still doing the reparenting workbook group, but I've been with them now 7 years, right? and we just continue to meet and to engage in it. And you know, the wonderful thing about that is there are times when we don't meet, and I never get the sense that, oh, they're abandoning me, they're leaving me, that they're breaking up with me. We've come together out of a place of wholeness. And it's really, really wonderful, the level of honesty and introspection that I get with working a step group. And that is part of what, for me in my sponsoring is, that individuals go to meetings, and individuals, not necessarily the meetings I go to, that if you're taking meds, take those meds, work with a therapist, that you get into a step group, and at some point you also sponsor uh, individuals in ACA. And I went down there. There's something about that I wanted to say, but now it escapes me. Um, hmm. Now I feel very comfortable and I feel loved. I'm feeling a lot of love for myself, and I feel my littles very much present with me and being with me and supporting me. Um, yeah, this emotional landscape of myself. I never had a sense of that. My purview coming into the ACA was all about the externals. I look to you to indicate to me how it was I felt, right? I look to you to give that, much like, with my parents. I look to them to give that to me. And I saw this interesting thing the other day as one of these apps where the parent was holding a baby and they would hit a table and make noise, say, oh, and look at the kid like, oh my God, you hurt yourself. You okay? And the kid would be like, well, I guess I'm not okay, and start crying, right? Based on that. That's the kind of power our parents had over us to be that reflection. And with me, I was attuned to my parents as to what their needs were. And their need was for me not to be bothering them. I mean, their need was for me to be self-sufficient and take care of myself. And I did that. Out of the thought was, if I did that thing that they wanted me to do, that I would get the love, or the amount of love the amount of love they were giving me was enough. But it never felt like enough. It never felt like I was getting that which I really needed, to be okay. And out of that, the belief came, well, there must be something wrong with me because I'm having this need, I'm wanting this. And so um, I'm wrong. Excuse me. It was that feeling of being wrong that led me to picking up alcohol, picking up drugs, eating compulsively, engaging in, uh, uh, not just engaging in sex, but maladaptive behaviors around sex. All the fantasy, the intrigue, the objectification that I was inclined to do was all ways of taking care of that uncomfortableness in me, of me not being enough, not having my needs met, and not recognizing, not having the language, which is one of the great things about ACA. It gave me a language, a way of identifying and speaking as to these things that I didn't have. Whereas in the past, it'd just be me, speaking to, oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Or this uncomfortable. Why am I feeling uncomfortable when it appears that nobody else is feeling uncomfortable? What's wrong with me? Something else wrong with me, you know? And it was that feeling that led me to feeling suicidal and not understanding, how to live life, how to be present to life. And and I think really the wonderful thing, I think, coming into ACA is this idea about reparenting and what that looks like. You know, and it's an odd concept, to get a second chance to reparent myself, and believing that, my parents were just the mechanisms for me being here. My actual higher power is my actual parent is a higher power, a loving God, if you believe in that, if you believe in, whatever that is. I came in the program, I thought God, Jesus hated me, that they didn't like me, right? And so coming into programs and they saying, I needed to find a God of my own understanding. I was just like, oh God, oh no. And one of my first meetings that I went to, there was a guy standing out front saying, passing out flowers to people as they came in. And this makes me ache, saying, hey, Jesus loves you, and giving people a rose as they came in. And I was like, oh man. I asked my sponsors, I'm like, man, do I got to do that? It's like, no, you ain't got to do that. That's just his way of his relating to his higher power. And over the course of time, I've come to a an understanding about that for myself that works for me. That when I came in, it was I believe that my sponsor had a higher power, right? I believe that relationship existed, and that was enough for me. And at points, the meeting became that for me, and then at other points, nature became that for me, and other points, other things became that for me. Such that as I sit here today, I have a belief in a personal relationship with a higher power. But it's taken me, and I don't recall saying this, but I've been sober in the beverage program 41 years, and in ACA maybe 16 years at this point. I'd have to check on that date, but in any event, um, it has been this evolution of my relationship with a higher power. It has been a constant growth uh, of identifying these severed parts of myself. And my belief is that, and this is my belief, this isn't in the red book, that with the degree of the trauma that I experienced, these parts of me got severed off. And what's coming up in this moment is my 5-year-old and the trauma that he experienced. And I remember in the occurrence of that, feeling like I needed to leave while this was occurring, and hearing other children outside playing and deciding that I was going to go there. And I left. And recognizing that, I did that, and that this part of me is reincorporated with me at this point in my life. And when the first time I got thrown out at 12, so I have a 12-year-old, I have a 18-year-old, and these parts of myself are very much a part of me today. And I can check in with them. And, the thing that my littles is what I call them, they aren't interested in, my education. They aren't interested in, my relationships. They aren't interested in that. They like attention. They like play. Um, they like safety. And I try to provide that to these parts of myself. Um, so reparenting, right? I often, much like today, as I had alluded to earlier about getting here today, my littles were very much in panic and thinking that we weren't going to be on time, for the meeting, because being here was very important to them, very important to me as well, because I love ACA. I love what it's given me. I love the way I get to show up in my life today and be present for myself and be able to take and bring that to my other relationships. A sense of authenticity, a sense of love and presence and connective and connection. And, there's a line in a reading that talks about one of the greatest gifts we can give people is letting them know that they've been listened, they were heard, that they were listened to, right? Which is really, really important, because then, and with that, I know I'm seen. I know I'm acknowledged, which is much unlike my relationship with my parents. And I had the um, experience recently with my mother, who's still alive, and I see pretty regularly. She had asked me to be the executor of her estate, of which she was letting me know that she was leaving the bulk of it to one of her grandkids. And she said in our meeting, she said, "Yeah, of all my grandkids, he's the only one that his parents threw him out of the house and abused him and did this and did that." And I sat there and I was like, "Oh my God, you did that to me, right? That's what you did to me." And I'm grateful that you're aware of the trauma that causes, you know, kids when that happens to them, right? And I think that's one of the worst things you could do to a kid is put them out, right? At any age, right? Because they're defenseless. They have no way of taking care of themselves. And I thought, I'm really, and I did say this to her, you and Dad did that to me. And she swept right on past that. But nevertheless, I was able to assert in that moment and do so, lovingly, but very confrontationally that, hey, this is what transpired, that you did to me. Um, so I'm able to reparent myself and I'm able to take space and I'm able to uh, love myself in ways that, I wasn't before. And is all as a product of the tools that we get in recovery in ACA. And it just becomes a question of, my ability. Well, this is the other piece, my ability to use them. And I get to use them as a result of practicing mindfulness. And what that means for me is there being space in me to hear these things when they come up in me. And I got that as a result of, for me, my meditation practice and having a space where I could go and share of myself in these ways and speak to these things, which I'm really, really grateful for, and we get a lot of tools in ACA. And I think that I'm coming to a close on my share. And I think what I'd like to hear from you all is, are there tools that your favorite tools in ACA that you get to use, or whatever it is that's a reflection that you were able to get from my sharing with you today? And with that, I will turn the meeting back over to the secretary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And as soon as the recording goes off, we can unmute and thank our speaker for today.